Greetings, Lumen students. It is week 10 and this is your Thursday video. I have some riddles for you related to your spelling words. And because there are 10 different riddles, I have all the spelling words out here in front of me. So go ahead and get a piece of paper out and let's see how many of these riddles you can solve. You're going to need to number from 1 to 10, so as soon as you're ready, then start the video up again. Number 1, One Direction. Number 2, Mona Lisa was painted on this. I can't see. There we go. That's better. Number 3, Mr. Tumnus. Some of these are tricky, I think. Number 4, this happened to the book Huckleberry Finn. Number 5, is that blank bicycle? Is that blank bicycle? Number 6 and number 7, I need to show you. Okay. Fill in the blank for number 6 and for number 7. And this is how I feel about each of you. Number 8, Bambi. Number 9, I need one to finish my grading. Number 10, Thanksgiving is a blank meal. Okay, let's try run through them again just really quickly. Number 1 is One Direction. Number 2, Mona Lisa was painted on this. Number 3, Mr. Tumnus. Number 4, this happened to Huckleberry Finn. Number 5, is that blank bicycle? Number 6 and number 7, blank, amazing, fantastic, and blank. Number 8, Bambi. Number 9, I need one. And number 10, Thanksgiving is a blank meal. Okay. Let's see if we can answer and correct these really quick. Number 1 is a band, One Direction. Mona Lisa was painted on a canvas. Mr. Tumnus is a fawn. He's this type of fawn, F-A-U-N. And Huckleberry Finn was banned at one point. Your bicycle, meaning it belongs to you. And you are, your awesome, fantastic, amazing, and great. G-R-E-A-T, great. Number 8 is Bambi, fawn, F-A-W-N. I need an aid, A-I-D-E. And Thanksgiving is a hearty meal, H-E-A-R-T-Y, hearty. Okay, how did you do? Pretty good? Okay, I have now a picture book to share with you. Just a couple of pages. We're going to, I want you to try to identify an adjective that is found on each page. Okay, here's my first page. This is a story about a boy that travels around on his bicycle. Okay. And he describes what he sees, and on this page he describes the cats. Okay, so I want you to pay attention to the adjective that he uses to describe these cats. Okay. I rode to Massachusetts on my sister's rusty bike and found just south of Marblehead a place I think you'll like. A gal lives there named Pat McDuff. Her cats have purple fur. They love to pile up on Pat's lap, and as she pets, they purr. So the adjective was good. Purple. Colors can be adjectives, and they are often used as adjectives, okay? So pay attention to those. Here's our next one, and I want you to look for the adjective that he uses to describe these eggs. See if you can think about what adjective might be used as you look at this picture. I rode to Pennsylvania on my sister's rusty bike and found just west of Stony Run a place I think you'll like. A guy lives there named Gilly Gibbs. His hens lay colored eggs. In fact, they lay so many, Gil gathers them in kegs. Colored. Did you get that right? Good. So not a specific color necessarily, but just that they are colored. A word that describes them. Here's our next one. What word do you think will be used to describe these pigs? You tell? This makes me think of our history video yesterday. Nero, you mentioned, was famous for allowing the city of Rome to burn. And in fact, we have an expression that we use today. Nero fiddled while Rome burned. Remember, it said that Nero was a lyre player, which is more like a harp. But I guess it's got changed a little bit as it's moved throughout time. Until now people say Nero fiddled while Rome burned. Meaning that the leaders were not at their posts. They were not doing what they should have been doing to protect their people. And they weren't paying attention like they should have been. Uh-oh, we better hurry. Hey, how do you think he described these pigs? What adjective? I rode to Alabama on my sister's rusty bike and found just west of Carbon Hill a place I think you'll like. A guy lives there named Willie Weems. He's trained 24 pigs. And while he gets his fiddle out, they all start dancing jigs. So you may have thought dancing pigs, and yes, that is true. But numbers can also be used as adjectives, okay, to describe nouns. How many of them are there? And he definitely did not illustrate 24, so that was kind of a tricky picture. Here's our next one. Whoa. How would he have described these frogs? What adjective would he have used for them? Let's check. Oh, they're actually toads. I rode to Minnesota on my sister's rusty bike and found just west of Granite Falls a place I think you'll like. A guy lives there named Jojo Jones. His pets are pampered toads. Old Jojo catches all their flies and then serves them a la mode. So you may have thought that they were hungry or lucky. No, you probably didn't think lucky with a fly on their ice cream. But yes, very pampered if they don't even have to catch their own flies. Spoiled, rich, I don't know, lots of different adjectives we could have used. Okay, how about these bears? What adjective could you use to describe these bears? I rode to Colorado on my sister's rusty bike and found just east of Toonerville a place I think you'll like. A guy lives there named Benny Finn. His rugs are living bears. And when Ben plugs his vacuum in, they all jump on the chairs. So you might not have guessed that the bears were living. Okay, but that's another word, that an adjective that describes them, isn't it? Okay, what state they're in. Living, dead, old, young, wrinkled. Colors can be adjectives, as we saw. Numbers, 1, 10, 20, 24, okay, many. Those all can be adjectives as well as, yeah, we did colors. Pampered, so that's kind of what they're like. Can also be adjectives to describe them. Good job. I have an interesting hero of mine to describe to you today. He was a Roman emperor, and I want to give you a couple adjectives that I think would describe him. He was spiritual. He was humble. He was courageous. He was blessed, maybe we would say. He was protected, and he was influential. He was powerful. Some good words, huh? Does that surprise you to think about an emperor that would have qualities like humble or spiritual, or I think I could even use the word kind? Okay, let's read a little bit more about him. Okay. Roman emperors kept on persecuting Christians until an emperor named Constantine came to the throne. Constantine was a fair man. Also, fair is another adjective they use. He worshipped the Roman god Apollo, but he didn't think it was right to put people in jail because of the god they worshipped. So he ordered the persecution to stop, and no one was to arrest Christians anymore. Constantine himself went on worshipping Apollo until something strange happened to him. Different ancient writers tell us different stories about Constantine. Some say he had a dream, others say he had a vision. But what Constantine saw, everyone agrees, but whatever Constantine saw, everyone agrees about what happened next. The emperor himself became a Christian. So what did Constantine see? One Roman writer tells this story about Constantine's vision. Constantine was marching towards the most important battle of his life. He had fought the enemy for months now and had not been able to triumph. The coming battle was his last hope. Would he win? Would the Roman Empire remain safe? Or would his soldiers surrender, be defeated and driven backwards by the enemy? He would know tomorrow when they met the enemy at the Milvian Bridge. He looked behind him at his army. They had fought hard against the invaders and they'd won. Now they were so tired that they could barely drag themselves along. Their feet hurt, their heels were blistered, their armor was heavy on their shoulders. Constantine glanced up at the gray, cloudy sky. On top of everything else, he thought it was going to rain. They would be tired, discouraged, and soaking wet. They would have to set up camp in the pouring rain, and no one would sleep well before the next morning's battle. Look, the soldier beside him said, the sun is coming out. Constantine squinted at the sky. It looked brighter, but that's not the sun, he said. What is it? It looks like a cross. Constantine's soldiers stared with open mouths. Above them in the sky hovered a cross of light, growing larger and brighter by the moment. The golden light from the cross fell across their weary faces until they were forced to blink and shield their eyes with their hands. The grass around them glittered with light. Underneath the cross, fire letters burned themselves across the sky. Constantine read them out one by one. By this sign you shall be victor. That is the cross of Christ, Constantine gasped. What does it mean? The soldiers asked. It means that we must fight for God, Constantine answered, the God of the Christians. When they set up camp that night, Constantine sent out an order to his men. Every soldier must have the sign of Christ on his shield, he ordered. Until that is done, we will not go into battle. So each soldier painted onto his shield the Greek letters standing for Christ's name. When they went into battle, Constantine led the charge under a banner bearing the name of the Christian God. Constantine's army won the battle of Milvian Bridge. Then he stood victorious on the bridge, and Constantine raised his sword to the sky. The God of the Christians gave me this victory, he announced, and from now on I will always fight under his banner. I will only worship him. After he won this battle, Constantine became a Christian, claiming that the Christian God had helped him to beat the enemy. He made Sunday a holiday all over Rome so that people could go to church, and soon many more people in the Roman Empire became Christians, following the example of their emperor. After he became a Christian, Constantine decided that the new center of the Roman Empire should no longer be in Rome. After all, Rome was an old city, beginning to be shabby and run down. Constantine moved the capital of the empire to another city that he named after himself, Constantinople. From now on, Constantinople, not Rome, would be the center of Roman power. Really interesting, right? Constantine, he was an interesting person, great Christian hero. Okay, the last thing we need to do is read a little bit more in The 7 Wonders of Sassafras Springs. This is day 3, Continued Difficulties and Discoveries. Sal and I searched, but we didn't find much. On their farm up on the ridge, Piggy Ellis and his sisters stuck their tongues out at me when I asked about a wonder, and their ma was canning beans and didn't have time to talk. "Why ain't you home helping your pa?" she scolded. Like all the mowing and weeding and milking and feeding I've been doing since 5 a.m. didn't count at all. Next door at the Mayer place, I got a friendlier welcome. I even got to sample Grandma Mayer's bread and butter pickles. They were tasty, but not enough to amount to a wonder. The Culpepper place was below the Mayers, but I didn't spend much time there. "You're Coles, crazy boy?" Ned Culpepper yelled as I approached. "Orville Payne told me to have a lookout for you. He said I'd better bar the chicken house door with you around." I skedaddled out of there before I had a chance to ask him about the wonders or about his cousin Holt. At least I was learning when to keep my mouth shut. I headed back to Yellow Dog Road. I had to get that sugar from my aunt, and maybe I'd have better luck in town. Halfway there, Sal doubled back, wagging her tail. I spun around to find out who she was so all-fired happy to see. I wasn't happy to see that it was Ray Ellen Hubble. Hubble rhymes with trouble. "Are you following me?" I asked. She stuck her nose up in the air. "It's a public road. Anybody can walk on it." "Well, you don't have to walk it so close to me." "I was just about to say the same thing to you." I looked down at Ray Ellen's dirty feet, her yellow braids as straight as 2 pencils, her scrawny self drowning in a huge pair of overalls. My pals and I avoided Ray Ellen. We all knew she stole pie out of our lunch buckets at school. "I thought you were looking for wonderfuls," she said. Leave it to Ray Ellen to get it all wrong. "Who told you that?" "None of your business, but it was Maggie Austin." I'd have to remind Jeb not to tell his sister my personal business again. "Well, I've got a wonderful," Ray Ellen announced. This girl could give a fellow a pain in the neck. "They're not wonderfuls," I told her. "They're wonders." I got one. I knew there was no point talking to Ray Ellen, who didn't even have a lunch bucket of her own, much less a wonder. She brought her lunch all rolled up in a blue bandana that got limp and smelly by lunchtime. "I'm busy now, Ray Ellen." I walked away, taking extra big steps, so she couldn't keep up with me. That didn't stop her from following me, so I tried to shut out the sound of her bare feet plopping along in the dust. Closer to the general store, I saw Albert Bowie and his brother Vern walking toward me. They were carrying a heavy-looking barrel between them. "What's that coming this way, brother? Is it a circus parade?" asked Vern. He was older than Albert or Jeb or me, taller, stronger, and a lot more ornery. "Here comes a giraffe, followed by a monkey." I glanced behind me at Ray Ellen. "Are you still following me?" "It's a free country," she answered. I tried to ignore her. "What do you got in there?" I asked the Bowie brothers. "Nails," said Albert. "Pa's going to build a new hog pen." The Bowies' hogs were the pride of the county, but I was glad we didn't live downwind of their farm. Vern grinned. "So are you and your girlfriend going?" "Ah, you know Ray Ellen," I said. "She's a pest." "I thought he was following me," said Ray Ellen. "I'm going to the store for my mother." With that, she flicked her braids and walked around me right past the Bowie brothers, down Yellow Dog Road, straight toward the general store. Vern and Albert hooted at her, but she never looked back once. Like I said, Hubble rhymes with trouble, and to my mind, Ray Ellen was anything but wonderful. I would have liked to avoid the general store and seeing Ray Ellen again, but there was that sugar and those clothespins I promised to get. So I ended up in town whether I wanted to go there or not. On one side of the street, there was Yount's General, a combination general store and post office. Next door was Sailor's Feed and Supply Store, and next to that was the Right Time, a 6-stool luncheonette run by Minnie Raymond. I would have liked a root beer along about then, but I didn't have a nickel to buy one. Across from the stores was the row of houses where the Sailors, Miss Raymond, the Younts, and the preacher's family lived. I didn't want to face Ray Ellen inside the store, so I waited outside on the sagging bench near the gas pumps. Next to me on the wall was a faded notice that read, "Handyman, Cully Pone, Ridge Road, no job too big nor small." No job at all, that's what Cully had, just a doggone bookcase. The screen door swung wide open with its usual squeal, and out came Ray Ellen. She wasn't carrying anything. "You still following me?" she asked. That girl was plain annoying. "I thought you had to get something for your ma." Ray Ellen reached in her pocket and pulled out a spool of white thread. "So I did. What are you here for?" Trying to stay out of trouble, Hubble." She frowned and stalked off. I entered the store, leaving Sal napping in the shade of the bench. As usual, I wandered through the aisles, looking at all the things I wished I could buy. I fingered striped suspenders and stiff new overalls, peeked in the pickle barrel, and examined jars of peppermint sticks and jawbreakers. Standing at the counter talking to Hiram Yount was Violet Rowan. She handed over a huge basket brimming with fresh-picked herbs. "You can come by late tomorrow or the next day, and I'll have your money," Mr. Yount told her. Violet was the tallest and smartest girl in Sassafras Springs. Ever since her pa died, she was also the poorest. Mr. Rowan had been struck by lightning in his field a few years back. Word is the lightning blew his boots right off his feet, and they found him 50 yards from where he was lying. And they found them, the boots, 50 yards from where he was lying. Like, that doesn't make sense. Now Violet and her ma, Yulie, took in washing and sewing. Most folks couldn't afford to pay them to do their chores, so they also picked wild herbs from the hills. Golden seal, horsetail, nettle, and red clover. A man from the city came into the store every few weeks and bought them to use in medicines. In the winter, the two of them made brooms to sell. When Violet was fixing to leave, she spotted me over by the pickle barrel. "Eben, Ray Ellen just told me you were looking for something wonderful." There were fireworks in Violet's bright blue eyes. "We've got just the thing you want." I pulled back because I thought she was going to grab me. I knew her from school, but us boys don't spend much time around the older girls. "Walk home with me and I'll show you," she said. I was in a spot. Whatever Ray Ellen told her was probably wrong. And I didn't want to be seen walking with a girl, even a nice one like Violet, but her farm was right behind ours, so I couldn't pretend I had to go in another direction. Like I said, I was in a spot. Pa expects me home for the milk, and I wasn't lying entirely. Maybe I could come tomorrow? Some of the fire went out of Violet's eyes. "All right," she said. "But you'll come tomorrow, promise?" "Sure," I said. Cross my heart. Once Violet was gone, Hiram's big voice boomed out across the store. "Well, Eben, what's this claptrap I hear about the 7 wonders of the world?" "Pa said he'd buy me a ticket to Colorado if I could find 7 wonders here," I explained. The storekeeper chuckled heartily. "I think your pa's pulling your leg. He knows you can't find 7 folks to agree in Sassafras Springs, much less 7 wonderful sights to see." I must have looked disappointed because Hiram leaned across the counter as far as his big belly would allow him, and in a low voice said, "But your pa did send off a letter to Colorado yesterday, just in case, I guess." "So Pa really believed I'd find 7 wonders, or he wouldn't have written Cousin Molly." "Still, he's pretty safe making that offer," Hiram chuckled. "Now what can I do for you?" "Sugar," I told him, "and 2 packages of clothespins, please." 10 pounds of sugar and 2 dozen clothespins felt like quite a load in the late afternoon heat. So I decided to cross lots, which meant cutting across neighbors' farms. It kept me in the shade and out of the view of people going back and forth on the road, especially Ray Ellen. Sal thought it was a fine idea. As I was passing the community church, the calm shade of the graveyard was mighty inviting. I knew the friends and neighbors residing there wouldn't pester me about wonders or anything else. The summer air was still so heavy, and you could practically grab it and hold it in your hand. It must have been 10 degrees cooler in the churchyard, though. I set down the heavy sack, settled down under an old oak tree, and closed my eyes to think. Finding 7 wonders had sounded fine sitting on the porch, but now that Ray Ellen, Orville, and Hiram were involved, it seemed plain foolish. Still, there was the promise of a train, of a mountain, of an adventure that I couldn't get out of my head. My mind was drifting toward Colorado when suddenly Sal jumped up, whining. "What is it, girl?" Sal's ears stood straight up. Then I heard a sound I will never forget. It was like nothing I have ever heard on this earth before. As I jumped up, I glimpsed the somber tombstones all around me. But the sound wasn't coming from the graveyard. It was coming from the church, and it wasn't organ music either. The old organ had collapsed a few years back, so Mrs. Milton had to pound out hymns on an out-of-tune piano, but it wasn't piano music either. What in creation could make such a sound? I whistled Sal over and headed for the church. It was cool and dark inside, and the strange music grew louder. I could make out the tune, but as many times as I've heard and sung the hymn, it never sounded like that before. The haunting notes didn't resemble an organ, a piano, a fiddle, or any instrument of this world. I half expected to find myself face to face with an angel playing a heavenly harp. Somebody was sitting up near the pulpit. Even before my eyes got used to the darkness, I could see it was no angel. Angels never wore overalls and plaid shirts in the pictures I had seen in Sunday school. When I could see better, I recognized Alvin Smiley. I hadn't gotten to his place yet. He lived just outside Sassafras Springs in a cluster of small, hardscrabble farms everybody called Bent Fork, because it was tucked in next to the bend of the creek. Pa told me once that folks down at Bent Fork didn't have much to work with, but they had high hopes. Though each farm there was no more than a shack and a square of land, Calvin's parcel mysteriously yielded more food per square inch than any other farm in the area. Calvin's head was bent low over the instrument that was making that strange music. It wasn't a guitar or a fiddle, but he did have a bow in his hand. Calvin looked up startled. "Who's that?" he asked. "It's me, Mr. Smiley. Eben McAllister, Cole McAllister's boy," I answered. "Well, howdy, Eben. I was caught up in my practicing and I didn't hear you come in," Mr. Smiley said. "Good to see you." I finally made out what Calvin Smiley's instrument was, and I could hardly believe my eyes. In one of his coffee brown hands was an ordinary hand saw, the kind used for cutting wood, and in the other hand was a regular fiddler's bow. "Were you playing that saw?" I asked. "Heavenly days, young fellow. I've been playing this old saw since I was younger than you. Mrs. Milton had to go visit her sister in Leesville, so the preacher asked me to play my saw this Sunday," Mr. Smiley explained. "Thought I'd practice here in the church for a while. Would you like to give it a listen?" I slid into the pew as Calvin clamped the handle of the saw between his knees, with the saw teeth pointing toward him. With one hand he held the flat tip of the saw and bent the blade off to the side, so it had a curve to it. Then he began to run the bow up and down across the dull edge of the saw, bending the blade back and forth as the sweet, sweet music started up again. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I had sung that tune 1,000,000 times in church, but it had never sounded like this before. The music drifted across the pews, sweet and sad and hopeful at once. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. The music hung in the air even after Mr. Smiley stopped playing. He put down his bow and stood up. "I think that'll satisfy the preacher, don't you, Eben?" "Yes, sir," I answered. "I never heard anything like it. How'd you learn to do that?" "I saw a peddler play a saw once when I was just a pup, so I taught myself to play. Pop thought I was a fool at first," Calvin said. "Then came a day that I changed his mind. Young man, no one ever laughed at my saw after that day. Pa thought this old saw was a positive marvel." I perked up at the word marvel. Marvel was like a wonder. Could Mr. Smiley's musical saw be a genuine wonder of Sassafras Springs? "Like a wonder of the world?" I asked eagerly. "Eben, you'll have to decide that for yourself," said Calvin. "I don't know about the world. To me, what happened with this saw wasn't merely amazing. It was a miracle. And if I got another wonder when I wasn't even looking for them, for one, that was a miracle of a kind too." Calvin Smiley's story of the musical saw. We'll pick that up again next week. All right, students, I guess that's all I've got for you. You are working on, little students, on your how-to papers. If you could write a 1 to 2 page paper about how to do something, please be as detailed as possible. You can use adjectives in that paper to make it come to life as well as lots of verbs describing to us the actions that we need to do, and the nouns, which would include the items that we will need to accomplish our task. Maybe even Smiley or Mr. Smiley could teach us how to play a saw. Have you ever seen a saw like that? I don't know. That's really, really interesting. So your how-to paper. We also are working on reading our books about how to change a life. The choices that I gave you were the Touching Spirit Bear by, what's his name, Ben Mickelson, or The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane by Kate DiCamillo. Little students, those are your 2 choices for our reading assignment right now. And guided instruction students, if you would like to pick them up, they're both awesome. Really talk about how to change, how someone's heart changes, what dramatic changes can take place in someone's life. So Eben's having some kind of interesting experiences, and maybe his life is going to change as a result of these wonders. We'll find out, and we'll catch you again next week. Thank you.